As in any leadership position, communication is critical for writing program administrators, whether they are internally interacting with writing faculty, support staff, administrative department heads, and students, or liaising with media, educational sales representatives, teacher-scholar, colleagues, and parents of potential students. In all of these cases, you will represent the writing program, and your ability to communicate will create important relationships and connections that will strengthen the reputation of the writing program. You should approach these interactions with your rhetorical expertise. As within any rhetorical situation, effective communication depends upon an analysis of your audience's attitudes about the topic, the explicit and implicit purposes of the issue, the local and long-term context of the matter, the exigencies of the situation, and how your approach represents your and your writing program's ethos. As the WPA, you will need to communicate to multiple audiences specific and explicit messages about general ideas on writing and writers, about your writing program, and about the programmatic efforts that you initiate. To do this communicative work effectively, you should consider the large frames, aka the bigger picture, of the subject that you address, as well as a choice of language that aligns with the values of the program. These careful articulations will express the intended beliefs of the program and foster potential allies. Two methods of language usage that a WPA should utilize are 1. Affirm and turn. Here's an example. Instead of a statement that alleges all students cheating, such as, "Stop student cheating, join us in workshops that go beyond use of turnitin.com to catch student plagiarism." Instead, you could rephrase those terms into more affirming tones. We should all invest in helping students use sources in ethical ways. Please join the writing program and library faculty in a conversation about students' knowledge about documentation that exceeds the mere use of turnitin.com. 2. State a positive, not a negative. Instead of, "There is no competency without context," a better turn of phrase would be, "Competencies always exist within context." In both of these communiques, you can see how the rephrasing has promoted a culture of affirmation for both students and faculty. You should also develop a consistent message about writers and your writing program, considering the following questions. What are your core messages about writers, writing, your program, and your approach? What key terms, principles, and values will be inherent in your messages? How do they align with the values of your campus allies? How will you reiterate and reproduce these terms of your programmatic values in your memos, brochures, websites, and conversations? If you were to describe your writing program to someone unfamiliar with it, how would you articulate it in less than 90 seconds? Your ability to make a thorough yet concise statement about your program and its efforts will help you when you develop the typical genres of the WPA communicative world. Now that we've discussed some of the aspects of communication and the WPA, let's pause and reflect upon some situations of communication that you will need to do soon. What is one challenging topic that you know you must communicate about in the next semester? What are your strengths as an administrative communicator? Where do you sometimes struggle as a communicator of administrative messages? What are 3 strategies you have or will use to compose administrative communications? Once you have spent some time thinking and writing about these questions, move on to the second part of this 2-part video series about the WPA and communication. The second video will discuss the types of difficult conversations that WPAs often confront.